He brought home a homeless boy and unknowingly brought his entire family's past crashing through the front door. When Xavier Musk offered his friend a warm meal, he had no idea it would unravel a secret Elon Musk never meant to confront. Who is this boy, and why does Elon freeze the moment he sees him? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain didn't fall that afternoon. It lashed, hammered, and screamed against the towering glass windows of the Musk estate like it was trying to get inside. Trees bent under the force of the wind, and puddles spread across the pristine drive like ink spilled from the sky. Inside the grand foyer, Mrs. Winters checked her watch for the third time. 4:15 p.m. Master Xavier was late again. The boy was never one for routines. While his siblings rode home in sleek Teslas and luxury shuttles from school, 12-year-old Xavier Musk always insisted on walking. "It helps me think," he'd say with that curious tilt of his head, like he was watching the world with eyes just a little older than his years. Most days, Mrs. Winters humored it, but today, the rain was biblical. "Should I call Mr. Musk?" Thomas, the head security guard, asked from the monitor station, his voice low and alert. Mrs. Winters hesitated. Elon had made it clear he didn't like to be disturbed during high-level meetings, especially not ones involving SpaceX and Mars colony logistics. "Give him 10 more minutes," she said, folding her arms. "You know how Master Xavier likes to stop and examine puddles and bugs." Her voice trailed off as the front door security panel chimed. A small light blinked. Thomas turned the monitor toward her. A soaked face peered up at the camera. Xavier. He looked like he'd swum home. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood another boy, a stranger, a shadow. Mrs. Winters leaned in. The second boy was taller, maybe 13, dripping from head to toe. His hair was slicked to his forehead, jeans clinging like a second skin, and the holes in his battered sneakers revealed soggy socks. A tattered backpack was slung over one shoulder, bulging and soaked through, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. Wide, dark, and watchful. Not the eyes of a child visiting a friend's mansion, the eyes of someone who'd learned to be on alert. Mrs. Winters hit the intercom. "Mrs. Winters, it's me." Xavier's voice crackled through the speaker. "I brought a friend for dinner. Can we come in?" There was a pause, a long one. Mrs. Winters pressed the release, the lock buzzed, and the towering double doors swung open. Xavier burst in like a windstorm, soaked to the bone but grinning. "This is Finn," he announced, shaking rainwater from his shaggy hair like a golden retriever. "He's coming to dinner." Finn lingered on the threshold, not moving until Xavier tugged him forward. "I can wait outside if it's a problem," Finn said, voice soft, guarded. "Xavier just said I could maybe get something to eat." "Nonsense," Xavier interrupted, grabbing his arm. "Dad always says we should help people." Mrs. Winters tried to keep her expression pleasant, but inside her nerves prickled. This boy, Finn, was clearly not from Xavier's private school or any of the circles they usually entertained. His clothes were worn to threads, his body thin, his posture defensive. Yet there was something else, too. Something thoughtful about the way he took in the grand foyer, not with awe, but with quiet calculation. He wasn't dazzled. He was studying, as if trying to determine if this place was safe. Thomas had already slipped away to alert the rest of the staff. Discreet protocols kicked in. Security scans, silent texts, quiet movements behind the scenes. Mrs. Winters knew the drill. But she also remembered something else. Years ago, before working for the Musks, she'd spent time at a youth shelter. She'd seen this look before, hungry, soaked children, pretending they didn't need anything. She softened her tone. "Hello, Finn. Let's get you both dried off." As they turned toward the grand staircase, Finn glanced up, his eyes scanning the chandelier, the massive fireplace, the sprawling entryway with its soft rugs and warm lights. "Your house is like a museum," he whispered to Xavier. Xavier beamed. "Wait till you see my room. I've got a slide that goes from my bedroom straight into the game room." Mrs. Winters said nothing, but as she followed behind them, her hand discreetly tapped a message into her phone. "Xavier brought home unknown boy. Appears homeless. Please advise." Somewhere far away, in a glass conference room lit by Mars mission schematics, Elon Musk's phone buzzed. But he didn't see the message yet. And none of them, not Mrs. Winters, not Xavier, not even Finn, could possibly have known that what had just begun would unravel secrets, alter lives, and turn the world of one of the most powerful men on Earth completely upside down. The rain outside hadn't let up. It was still hurling itself against the mansion like it had a score to settle. Upstairs, in one of the many opulent bathrooms with heated floors and spotless marble, Mrs. Winters handed a bundle of clothes through the half-open door. "You boys get changed. These should fit," she said gently. "Finn, they are from Xavier's older brother. Make yourself comfortable." "Thank you, ma'am," came Finn's quiet voice from behind the door. "Ma'am." The word struck her. So polite, so cautious. She'd heard that tone before, years ago, when she volunteered at a youth shelter. The kids who said ma'am were the ones who didn't trust easily, the ones who'd had to learn the rules of survival. Downstairs, Chef Marco was already preparing a meal, one of Xavier's favorites, just in case the guests stayed. Mrs. Winters moved through the kitchen with practiced calm, but inside she was still rattled. This wasn't a scheduled dinner, not a Musk Foundation PR event. This was something entirely unpredictable, and it was happening under Elon Musk's roof without warning. By the time the boys came down, the aroma of grilled cheese, warm soup, and fresh-baked cookies filled the air. Xavier's hair was still damp but wild as ever, and he practically bounced to the counter. Finn followed a step behind, dressed in slightly oversized jeans and a SpaceX hoodie. He looked awkward, out of place, like he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to exist in such a warm, well-lit space. "You can put your wet clothes in the dryer, Finn," Mrs. Winters offered, gesturing to the laundry area. "I'm okay," Finn replied, clutching them tightly. They're good clothes, good enough." Her heart twisted. That kind of possessiveness? It wasn't about fashion, it was about survival. When everything you own fits in one bag, letting go of even damp socks feels dangerous. "All right," she said softly. "No pressure. Are you hungry?" Finn nodded, but he didn't move toward the food. "Go on," Xavier said, grabbing a sandwich. "Chef Marco's the best." Finn edged closer. He picked up a sandwich, hesitated, then took a tiny bite. 1, 2, then suddenly 3, 4, 5. He devoured it like someone who hadn't eaten all day. Because he hadn't. "When did you last eat?" Mrs. Winters asked gently, pretending to rearrange napkins so she wouldn't startle him. "Yesterday," Finn mumbled. "The library was closed today. Some kind of event." That explained it. The library, a quiet place where no one asked questions. Mrs. Winters exchanged a glance with Chef Marco. The boy was smart, you could see it in his eyes, sharp, observant, and clearly starving for more than just food. "How'd you two meet?" Chef Marco asked, keeping his tone light. "At the library," Xavier said, grinning. "He was reading this old rocket book. I asked him about it, and he knew everything. Like, everything. More than my science teacher." "I just read a lot," Finn said, cheeks coloring. "The library lets me stay all day. They have bathrooms and water fountains, and sometimes Miss Peterson, the librarian, she leaves food. Accidentally. On purpose." Mrs. Winters' phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Musk himself, not his assistant. "Tell Xavier I'll be home in 20 minutes. Don't let the boy leave." Her hands trembled slightly as she set the phone down. Elon never left meetings early, not ones about Mars. "Boys," she said, forcing her voice to stay even, "Mr. Musk is on his way home. He's looking forward to meeting you, Finn." Finn went pale. "Elon Musk is coming here? Right now?" Xavier beamed. He never comes home this early. This is awesome. Finn, meanwhile, looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. Maybe I should go. I didn't mean to cause trouble. No way, Xavier said firmly, gripping his arm. You're staying. You're my guest. Mrs. Winters watched them both, the billionaire's son and the boy from the street, bonded over nothing but kindness and curiosity. But still, something stirred inside her. A gut feeling that this wasn't just a chance encounter. Then from the hallway came the soft hum of an electric vehicle pulling into the garage. Mr. Musk was home. The kitchen fell into a hush. Footsteps approached, not rushed, not annoyed, just measured. Then Elon Musk stepped into the room. He paused, his eyes going first to his son and then landing on Finn. And in that instant, something shifted. Not just in the room, in the world. When Elon Musk entered the kitchen, everything froze. The billionaire's presence always carried weight, but tonight it was something else. He wasn't just the tech titan returning from a meeting. He was a father seeing something he couldn't quite explain. His gaze locked on Finn, and for a long, breathless moment the room held still. Even Mrs. Winters, who had worked for the Musk family for years and thought she'd seen it all, felt the hairs rise on her arms. Elon didn't speak. He didn't rush forward. He simply stared, studying the boy's face with an intensity that made Finn shift awkwardly in his borrowed clothes. Xavier, oblivious to the emotional undercurrent, ran to his father. "Dad, this is Finn, the friend I told you about. He's amazing with rockets, like, seriously amazing." Elon placed a hand gently on Xavier's shoulder but kept his eyes on Finn. "Hello, Finn. I hear you're joining us for dinner tonight." Finn stood up so fast his stool nearly toppled. "Sir? Mr. Musk?" "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just cold and wet and—" Xavier said. He stopped, visibly flustered, clutching his backpack like a shield. "I can leave now." Elon's voice was calm but firm. "No need. Finish your food." Then, turning to Mrs. Winters, "Could you prepare the blue guest room, please, and find more clothes that might fit our visitor?" Mrs. Winters blinked, caught off guard. "Of course, Mr. Musk. Right away." As she left the room, she heard something she'd never heard from Elon before. Him asking a child about books. "What have you been reading at the library, Finn?" Finn hesitated, then answered softly, "Mostly engineering and space stuff, some physics, science fiction too. I like thinking about what's possible and what's not supposed to be." Elon nodded, seemingly intrigued. "What do you like most about space?" Finn glanced up from under damp lashes. "That it makes you feel small, but also, like maybe you could be part of something big. Bigger than Earth. Bigger than anything." Mrs. Winters, now standing by the kitchen door, froze at that. There was something in Elon's eyes, not just curiosity, recognition. A quiet storm building behind his famously unreadable expression. They moved to the kitchen island, where Chef Marco had laid out more food. Finn sat again, a little more at ease now, and began eating slowly, carefully, as if unsure if it would all be taken away at any moment. Elon sat across from him. "You said you've been staying in Oakwood Park?" Finn nodded between bites. "Behind some bushes. There's a hollow space where the guards don't check. If it rains too hard, I go under the bus shelter." "You've been living like that since your grandmother died?" Elon asked, his tone still even, but Mrs. Winters could hear the faint edge in it now, an undercurrent of something deeper. "Yes," Finn said, then clarified. "I didn't want to go to a group home. I've heard the stories. I'd rather be on my own." Elon was silent for a beat. Then, "And no other family?" "My mom died when I was 6. I never knew my dad. Grandma was it." That hit like a shot. Elon's shoulders tensed. Mrs. Winters, returning with folded clothes, noticed it instantly. Something wasn't right. Something in his body language. "Well," Elon said at last, "we have room. No reason to sleep in a bush tonight." He looked at Mrs. Winters. "The blue room, if it's ready." "It is, sir." And tomorrow, he added, standing, I'd like to speak with Finn again, perhaps in my office. Finn's eyes widened. I don't want to cause trouble. You haven't, Elon said, pausing at the door. Quite the opposite. And with that, he disappeared down the hall. As the boys ran off to look at books and games, Mrs. Winters turned to Chef Marco. Did you see the way he looked at that boy? Marco nodded, wiping down the counter slowly, like he saw a ghost. Upstairs in the blue guest room, Finn laid his worn-out backpack by the door and stared at the enormous bed. The soft towels, the fresh clothes folded just for him. He had lived in silence for months. But now, a stranger had welcomed him into his home, treated him with unexpected kindness, and looked at him as if he meant something. Finn couldn't sleep that night, because for the first time in a long, long time, he didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew it would change everything. Sleep didn't come easily for Finn. He lay awake on the plush mattress of the blue guest room, staring up at the intricate ceiling moldings, trying to make sense of the world he'd just stepped into. The silence was unnatural. No rustling wind, no buzzing insects, no distant city sounds. Only the quiet hum of luxury. For a boy used to sleeping with one eye open on a park bench, it was almost too much. He tried to close his eyes, but they kept snapping open. His backpack sat by the door. Packed, zipped, ready to go, just in case. At 2:13 a.m., Finn quietly slipped out of bed. His bare feet padded across the thick carpet as he crept to the window. The Musk estate stretched out before him, lit with soft path lights. The tall security fence in the distance, like a boundary between two different worlds. One that had always been closed to him, until now. But why? He glanced at the intercom button Mrs. Winters had shown him. Part of him wanted to press it, maybe just to hear another human voice. Instead, he stepped into the hallway, drawn by a dull, golden light flickering from under a door down the corridor. It was slightly ajar. He approached, slowly, silent. Inside, Elon Musk sat at a wide oak desk, back slightly hunched, his face bathed in the glow of 3 monitors. One displayed a browser window filled with search results. Another showed a scanned copy of a document labeled Birth Certificate, Sarah Reeves. The third, most chilling of all, was a paused security camera image of him. Finn, stepping through the front door earlier that evening. Finn's breath caught. Elon was speaking softly, on the phone, but unaware he was being overheard. No, I don't have a last name yet, just Finn. Around 13, the grandmother passed 3 months ago. No record of a father. I need everything. Hospital records, guardianship filings, school history, CPS involvement. Yes, pull anything you can from Oakwood Park and Los Angeles County. Finn's stomach twisted. So it was a setup. A charity stunt? A publicity ploy? Some rich guy's experiment in human kindness? The floor creaked under his foot. Elon looked up. There was a pause. Not one of surprise, but recognition. Like he'd expected to find Finn there. Couldn't sleep? He asked, setting the phone down. Finn hesitated, his fingers curling around the strap of his backpack. The bed's too soft, he muttered. To his surprise, Elon chuckled. I get that. When I first moved to the US from South Africa, I couldn't sleep on American mattresses either. Too comfortable. Sometimes, comfort feels unfamiliar, even scary. He stood up and walked to a kitchenette tucked in the corner of the study. Hot chocolate? He asked casually. Finn hesitated again, then gave a small nod. As Elon prepared the drinks, silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, but charged, like 2 minds turning the same question from opposite sides. You were on the phone, Finn said, his voice quiet. You were looking into me. Elon didn't flinch. I was. I am. Way. Finn's voice cracked, a blend of curiosity and fear. Elon handed him the mug, the steam rising between them. Because there's something about you, Finn. Something I can't explain. Not just your knowledge, not just your story. He paused. You feel Familiar. The words sat heavy in the air. Finn sipped the hot chocolate slowly. It was rich, thick, and oddly comforting. So, what are you trying to figure out? If I'm worth saving? Elon looked him dead in the eye. No, I already know you are. He walked back to his desk, pulled a chair around, and sat across from Finn. I'm trying to understand why our paths crossed, and whether it's chance or something more. Finn blinked. What do you mean? Elon was quiet for a moment. Sometimes in life we meet someone who changes everything. A single person who shifts the entire course of your future. When I met Xavier's mom, that happened. When I hired Mrs. Winters, that happened. And now, with you, I feel that again. Finn didn't know what to say. Elon continued, his voice softening. You've survived more than most people your age could imagine, and yet, here you are, discussing aerodynamics and orbital velocity like a junior engineer. He smiled faintly. That's rare. That's extraordinary. There was no ego in Finn's voice when he said, I just read a lot. And you think in ways that even my top engineers don't, Elon added. They sat in silence again, the fire crackling in the background. Finally, Finn asked the question that had haunted him since he stepped into the mansion. So what now? Do I go back to the park, or do I stay here like some guest? Elon leaned forward. No, Finn, you're not a guest. He looked serious now, more serious than Finn had ever seen him. I don't know yet what this is, but I do know this. You're safe here, and you're welcome here, for as long as you want to be. Finn's chest tightened. It was the first time in months someone had said those words. You're safe. The mug trembled in his hands. He nodded, but his voice was barely a whisper. Okay. And for the first time in a long while, he believed it. The days that followed were unlike anything Finn had ever known. He woke each morning to the smell of fresh pancakes or scrambled eggs, laid out by Chef Marco like a daily celebration. He was given clean clothes every morning. No rips, no stains, no desperate rotation of the same two shirts. Mrs. Winters made sure of it, sometimes even laying them out the night before. Finn found himself falling into the rhythm of life at the Musk mansion. There was structure, warmth, even laughter, things he hadn't felt in months. And yet, somewhere beneath the comfort, something else brewed. A question, a doubt, a whisper he couldn't quite silence. Why? Why was Elon Musk, the busiest man in the world, the architect of Mars colonization, the mind behind Tesla and Neuralink, spending so much time with him? It wasn't just kindness. It couldn't be. Not when Elon Musk was suddenly home for dinner, setting aside napkins covered in rocket designs to ask Finn about his ideas. Not when he sat quietly beside him in the study, listening intently as Finn sketched cooling systems or asked about fuel recovery efficiencies. Not when he canceled meetings, actual NASA meetings, just to help Finn adjust to school or walk him through the workshop. It didn't add up, and Finn wasn't the only one who noticed. The whispers started in the halls of the mansion, soft at first, among staff who knew how to stay discreet, but no one could completely hide their curiosity, not when Elon's entire routine had shifted around the arrival of one mysterious boy. I don't understand, Chef Marco murmured one night to Mrs. Winters. Why this child? Mr. Musk has never brought anyone in off the street, not even through charity. Mrs. Winters lowered her voice. He's not just a charity case. I've seen the way Mr. Musk looks at him. It's different, protective. Then came the staff theories, passed like contraband during coffee breaks in hushed tones. Maybe he's Elon's nephew, one gardener whispered, a secret family member. Or a publicity stunt, muttered one of the night guards. The man's companies have taken some hits lately. This could soften his image. But the most chilling theory came from Maya, Elon's teenage daughter. It was late afternoon. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the estate grounds glowed under soft golden light. Finn had slipped away to the back garden, needing air, needing space from all the eyes, the questions he didn't know how to answer. He found a quiet bench beneath a willow tree and sat with his knees tucked to his chest. "Mind if I sit?" He looked up to see Maya, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Finn shrugged. "It's your house." She sat beside him, silent for a long moment before finally saying, "So what's your deal?" Finn glanced at her warily. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, turning to face him, "why is my dad so interested in you? He's never canceled meetings, not for birthdays, not for holidays, but he's skipped 4 in the last week to talk with you. That doesn't just happen." Finn had no answer. He stared at the grass, feeling suddenly small. Maya went on, softer now. "You don't look like us. You're clearly not from our world, and yet you're in it. Living here, being treated like," she hesitated, "like something more than a guest." He looked up. "You think I'm some scam, don't you?" "No," she said quickly. "That's not it. I don't think you're pretending. I think he's hiding something." The words hit harder than they should have. Maya stood. "Just be careful, Finn. My dad's not evil or anything, but he doesn't do anything without a reason. He's always 10 steps ahead. If you're here, it's because it fits into a plan. Just make sure you know what that plan is." Then she walked away, leaving Finn alone with a swirl of confusion and fear and something worse, hope. Because deep down, beneath all the suspicion and noise, a seed had taken root. A crazy, impossible thought. What if there was a reason Elon had taken him in? Not charity, not PR, but something more, something personal. Finn stood from the bench, heart pounding, and headed back inside. He passed Xavier in the hallway, who smiled wide and slapped his shoulder. "Tomorrow's the lake house trip," Xavier said. "You have to come. It's amazing. Water, boats, and marshmallows the size of your face." Finn nodded, managing a small smile. But his thoughts were elsewhere. He would go, he would play along, but first, he needed to know. He needed answers. And he would start with the one man who had them all, Elon Musk. The next morning arrived draped in fog, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Finn awoke early, sunlight just beginning to push through the edges of the blinds. The mansion was quiet, still. He got dressed in the clothes Mrs. Winters had set out, crisp jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers so new they still squeaked on the marble floor. But his mind was nowhere near the lake house trip Xavier had been excitedly talking about the night before. His thoughts circled around Maya's warning like vultures. He's always 10 steps ahead. The question gnawed at him. What reason could Elon Musk, of all people, have to change his entire life for one homeless boy? Downstairs, breakfast was already underway. Chef Marco flipped pancakes while Mrs. Winters filled thermoses with hot cocoa. Xavier bounced in place, backpack half-zipped, shouting about swimming goggles and marshmallow bags. Elon, unusually relaxed, sipped coffee and scrolled through a tablet. But Finn barely touched his plate. "Everything okay?" Elon asked, glancing up. Finn nodded too quickly. "Just tired." Elon didn't press, but something flickered in his eyes. Concern? Guilt? Maybe both. Soon after, they piled into the sleek black Tesla and began the 2-hour drive to the Musk family's private lake house, a modern glass and wood structure nestled beside a sparkling alpine lake, hidden by pine trees and protected by an iron gate. The place was stunning, breathtaking even. But as Finn stepped out into the cool mountain air, his awe was dulled by the weight in his chest. By late afternoon, the kids were splashing in the water. Even Maya, usually aloof, was laughing, her hair slicked back from diving off the dock. For a moment, it felt like Finn had stepped into someone else's life, one filled with summer joy and family traditions. But that night, as the sky turned a brilliant orange and the lake reflected firelight from the Musk family's bonfire, Finn noticed something strange. Elon was watching him again, not in judgment, not even curiosity, but with something deeper. A searching expression, like he was waiting for the right moment. Finn didn't have to wait long. "Would you take a walk with me?" Elon asked quietly, just as the others went inside to shower. Finn hesitated. Sure. They followed a winding gravel path around the edge of the lake, the silence between them heavy with all the things neither had said. After a few minutes, Elon stopped in front of a small boathouse and pulled out a key. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said, opening the creaky door. Inside, it was nothing like the polished brilliance of the mansion. It was humble, even cluttered. Papers, sketches, old blueprints tacked to the walls. On the desk lay a few worn books, and scattered across the shelves were models of rockets, Mars colonies, and unmarked inventions. It was a mind made manifest. Finn stepped inside, awestruck. "This is incredible." Elon nodded but didn't smile. Instead, he moved to a drawer and pulled out a worn envelope. "I didn't plan to show you this here," he said, "but I think it's time." He handed the envelope to Finn. Inside was a photograph, faded, soft at the corners. It showed a much younger Elon, maybe in his late 20s, standing next to a woman with long, dark hair and fierce blue eyes. Finn's heart nearly stopped. "That's my mom," he whispered. "Sarah." Elon nodded slowly. "Yes. Her name was Sarah Reeves. We met years ago at a conference in Toronto. She was brilliant, curious, driven. She had a passion for propulsion systems that blew my mind." "You knew her?" Finn's voice was barely audible. "I more than knew her," Elon said. "We were together for almost a year. Then we lost touch." A long pause. "I didn't know she had a son," Elon added. "Not until recently. Not until I saw you." Finn's breath caught in his throat. "What are you saying?" Elon looked at him squarely. "I'm saying, I believe you're my son." The world went still. Finn's legs nearly buckled, and he stumbled backward, catching himself on the edge of a chair. "What? That doesn't make sense." "I had your hairbrush tested," Elon admitted quietly, "the day after you arrived." "You what? Without telling me?" Finn's voice rose, raw with betrayal. "I'm sorry," Elon said, and this time it sounded real. Genuine regret, not just polite apology. "I had to be sure." Finn's thoughts spun. Every moment since that rainy day flooded back with a new, blinding light. The attention, the protection, the instant, unexplainable connection. It hadn't been random. None of it had. "And the test?" Finn asked, his voice shaking. "It confirmed what I suspected," Elon said, his eyes never leaving Finn's. "You're my biological son." Silence fell like a thunderclap. Finn stared at the photograph again, at his mother, at Elon, standing together in a moment that felt like a lifetime ago. Something inside him cracked open. Grief. Shock. Maybe even a strange flicker of hope. "Why didn't she tell you?" he asked, eyes wet. "I don't know," Elon whispered, "but I intend to find out." Outside, the trees rustled gently in the night wind. Inside the boathouse, a boy who had once believed he had no one now stood face to face with a man who might just be his father, and a truth that would change everything. The walk back to the main house from the boathouse felt like moving through molasses. Finn's feet dragged across the gravel path, his mind spinning with too many thoughts to catch. Behind him, Elon walked in silence, hands tucked in his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable. But Finn could feel the weight of what had passed between them, lingering like a storm cloud. His heart thudded against his ribs. "Son," he said, "I'm his son." The words felt impossible, surreal, like he'd stepped into the middle of someone else's life. And yet, somewhere deep down, a small part of him whispered, "You already knew." The way Elon looked at him, the way he'd been protected, prioritized, even when it made no sense. And that spark? When they talked about rockets, or balance, or energy systems, like a current had always been running between them, waiting to be discovered. But it didn't make this any easier. When they reached the porch, The warm light of the lake house poured out through the open doorway. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, where Xavier and the others were making s'mores. For a second, Finn hesitated. He couldn't go back in, not with the truth he now carried like a live wire in his chest. "I need a minute," Finn mumbled. He stepped around the side of the house and sank onto a bench overlooking the water. The lake was calm now, a mirror of the stars above. But inside Finn, everything churned. He pulled the photo out of his pocket, the one Elon had given him in the boathouse. His mother looked so alive, so vibrant, and standing next to her, Elon looked nothing like the man he knew now. He was younger, leaner, and smiling with his whole face. And yet, the resemblance between the man in the photo and the one Finn had seen every day since that rainy Tuesday was undeniable. So was the resemblance between Elon and himself. He ran his fingers over the photo's edges, careful not to smudge it. "Why didn't you tell him, Mom?" he whispered. "Why did you keep this secret?" He didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. "Hey," Xavier said softly. "Are you okay?" Finn hesitated, then nodded, too quickly. "Yeah, just needed air." Xavier sat beside him, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. He glanced at the photo in Finn's hands. "Is that her, your mom?" Finn didn't answer. He didn't need to. Xavier's eyes widened slightly. "You do look like her," he said. "But you also look like—" He stopped, realizing the truth a beat too late. "Wait, no way." Finn turned to him, finally meeting his eyes. "Xavier, there's something you need to know." He took a breath, steadying himself as best he could. "Your dad, he's not just helping me because I was homeless, or because we talked about rockets. He knew my mom, a long time ago, before I was born." Xavier blinked, confusion turning to disbelief. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm his son, biologically. He took a DNA test. It's confirmed." Xavier stared at him. His jaw dropped, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like someone had hit the pause button on his brain. "You're my brother?" Finn nodded slowly. "Half-brother. Yeah." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the lake water against the dock. Then Xavier let out a low breath and laughed. Just once, a short, incredulous exhale. "Holy crap," he muttered. "That's insane." Finn gave him a sideways glance. "You're not mad?" Xavier shrugged. "I mean, it's a lot. But mad? No. This is kind of cool. I always wanted a brother who actually understood all the rocket stuff." A smile tugged at the corner of Finn's mouth, despite the emotional hurricane raging inside him. "Guess you got one." Xavier grinned. "Man, we really have to redesign that Martian hydroloop now. If we're brothers, it's basically our destiny." They both laughed. It was shaky, awkward, and maybe a little teary, but it was real. From the porch, Maya appeared, watching them from the shadows. She'd overheard just enough to connect the dots. Her expression was unreadable, something between surprise and a quiet, "I knew it." Inside, Elon stood in the hallway, listening. He hadn't followed them down the path, he knew better. But when he saw Finn and Xavier laugh, that brief moment of brotherhood taking shape, something shifted behind his eyes. Relief, maybe? Or something more fragile? Hope? As the boys came inside, Elon stepped forward. "Everything all right?" Finn nodded. "Yeah." There was still so much left to say. So many unanswered questions, but for now, Finn had crossed a threshold. He wasn't just a guest anymore, or even just a rescue. He was a son, a brother, a piece of a legacy that had, for years, been lost in silence. And tomorrow that legacy would be tested again, because James Carter, his mother's brother, would soon arrive. And with him, answers Finn wasn't sure he was ready to hear. The next morning dawned with an odd stillness hanging over the Musk lake house. The sky was overcast, casting a gray-blue hue over the shimmering water. Inside the glass-walled kitchen, the smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air, but Finn barely touched his plate. He was dressed neatly, collared shirt, clean jeans, and sneakers still crisp from their box, but his fingers wouldn't stop fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve. Across the table, Xavier kept shooting him nervous glances between mouthfuls of scrambled eggs. "He's just a guy," Xavier said, trying to sound casual. "A guy with a wrench and a trucker hat. You've talked to scarier people." Finn gave him a weak smile. "You mean your dad?" Xavier smirked. "Exactly." They both tried to laugh, but the tension in the room was too thick to ignore. Upstairs, Elon was on a video call with Lisa, finalizing details for the afternoon meeting with Child Protective Services. Today wasn't just about introductions, it was about decisions. Legal ones. At precisely 10:03 a.m., the gate security monitor chimed. A truck pulled up the winding gravel driveway, dusty, no nonsense, and entirely out of place amid the sleek lines of the Musk estate. Finn's heart jumped into his throat. James Carter stepped out of the truck. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a flannel shirt tucked into worn jeans. A duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a cautious expression lined his weathered face. But his eyes, deep blue just like Finn's, were scanning the house with a mix of hesitation and hope. Mrs. Winters opened the door before he could knock. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, "they're waiting for you." In the living room, Finn stood as his uncle entered. For a second, the world seemed to pause. James stopped in the doorway, eyes fixed on Finn. "You're taller than I expected," he said, voice low and rough like gravel. "But the eyes. You've got her eyes." Finn swallowed hard. "You knew my mom?" James stepped closer. "She was my little sister. I lost her before I ever got to fix things between us." There was a beat of silence before James reached out, slowly, cautiously, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to. Finn didn't move away. Their handshake turned into something closer to an embrace, awkward but real. It wasn't the kind of hug built from years of connection. It was the first brick in a foundation neither of them had expected to build. Elon entered moments later, his presence commanding as always, though there was a softness around his eyes that hadn't been there just weeks ago. "Mr. Carter," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." James shook it. "Still getting used to this whole thing. Honestly, I thought someone was pulling my leg when your people called." "It's all very real," Elon said, voice steady, "and very important." They sat. Coffee was poured, questions asked, stories exchanged. Finn learned that James had served in the Army for nearly a decade before settling in Oregon as a mechanic. He lived alone, never married, no kids, but the pain of losing his sister was something he still carried, etched into his voice every time he said her name. "I never even knew she had a son," James admitted, looking at Finn with a mix of guilt and wonder. "If I had known, I would have come." "I believe you," Finn said softly. Eventually, the conversation turned, inevitably, to the question on everyone's mind. "What happens next?" James asked, looking at both Elon and Finn. Before Elon could speak, Finn cleared his throat. "I've thought about this a lot," he said, "about where I belong. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have options. A family." He looked at James. "You're my blood. I want to know you. I want you in my life." Then he turned to Elon. "But this is where I've started to feel like I'm becoming who I'm meant to be. Not just because of the mansion or the school or the food, but because of him." Elon sat still, hands clasped together, listening. "I don't want to choose between you," Finn continued. "I want both of you in my life. But if you're asking me where I want to live, where I feel safe and challenged and seen, it's here." James leaned back in his chair, absorbing the words. Then he nodded. "Well," he said with a half smile, "you sound just like your mother, stubborn, clear-headed, and always smarter than the adults around her." Elon looked at James. "Are you comfortable with that arrangement? We can establish legal guardianship here with full visitation and involvement from you." James nodded. "He's a good kid," If this is where he thrives, I won't stand in the way of that. I just want to be part of his life moving forward." The deal was unspoken, yet sealed with that simple understanding. Two men, once strangers, now tethered by a boy they were both willing to protect. Later that night, Finn stood in Elon's office holding a manila envelope Lisa had delivered after the paperwork had been signed. "Official now?" he asked. Elon nodded. "You're home, for real." Finn opened the envelope. Inside was a birth certificate with an amended section. Father's name, Elon Reeve Musk. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elon said quietly, "I may have missed the first 13 years, but I'm here for the rest. Every step, every launch, every failure, every dream." Finn blinked hard, nodding. "I know, and for the first time, I believe it." As he turned to leave, Elon added, "You're not just my son, Finn. You're the part of my story I never knew was missing." Finn paused in the doorway, heart full. "And you're the reason I get to start writing mine." Outside, the stars glittered overhead, no longer distant, but reachable. In a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet struggles of those around us, the story of Finn and Elon Musk reminds us of something powerful, that a single act of kindness can unravel a truth bigger than anyone imagined and completely change the course of a life. What began as a young boy offering shelter to a homeless friend ended in the revelation of a hidden family bond, and more importantly, the birth of a new beginning. This story teaches us that family isn't always about blood. It's about connection, care, and the courage to show up for someone when it matters most. It's about the second chances we give, the walls we break down, and the futures we dare to rewrite. In today's society where so many feel unseen or unheard, this tale is a timely reminder that compassion, empathy, and listening can be more powerful than any fortune or fame. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, if it made you think, cry, or smile, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. Because you never know, the smallest act of kindness might just lead to the most unexpected discovery. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never stop believing in the power of connection.